Today is September 6th, 2017, and I'm here talking with Eunice. Eunice, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
It's nice meeting you too.
And it's going to be great getting to know you. So, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's begin. Tell me your whole name and date you were born.
Eunice Muriel Blanchard Roberson Peterson, and a nickname of Doc, D-O-C, after Doc Blanchard, who is a football player at West Point. And my birthday is September 1st, 1927.
Wow. Were you named after anyone else other than, I know your nickname you got from someone, but was your given name, were you named after a family member or anyone?
My father jokingly said that I was named after one of his girlfriends.
Oh, okay, all right. And where were you born?
I was born in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay. Let's talk about your mom and dad. Do you remember their birthdays, their first name, last name, and birth dates?
Villa Estelle Porter and Clifford Burton Blanchard. My mother was born September 25th, 1909, and my father was born October 20th, 1899.
How about that? Very good.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a tough question. What about your grandparents? Do you remember them?
Yes. I don't remember their birthdays, but my grandfather, it was Alfred Ernest Blanchard, and my grandmother was her last name was Porter.
Okay.
And at 90 years old, I'm old enough to be able to be forgiven for not remembering.
That's exactly right. So, did you grow up in the city or town that you were born in?
We grew up on a farm out in the outskirts of Stamford, Connecticut,
Okay.
on a dairy farm, and with cattle and workhorses and chickens and goats and a couple of dogs and cats.
And you said that was the best place to grow up and raise children.
It was the best place in the world because you learned so much. You had to learn to help with the work that was there too.
You see or you hear stories about the children helping on a farm. Was that the kind of life you grew up, or did the adults take care of most of the responsibilities and the children?
My father was manager of the farm, and Dr. Walter C. Wood owned the farm. He had been a heart surgeon in New York City, and his doctor told him that if he didn't retire, he would be dead in a year. So he retired to the country and bought the farm.
Okay. When you say bought the farm, you mean he really bought the farm? He didn't,
Oh yeah, I believe it was started, I don't know.
Right.
He added to it and added some buildings on it too.
Well, did you go to high school? I mean, all through grade school and high school, did you graduate high school from there?
Yes, we did move away in 1938, moved to Massachusetts. My father wanted to start his own business, a chicken farm, and it was during the Depression, a depression at that point. And he lost it because eggs went to 20 cents a dozen.
Oh.
And we moved back to Stamford, and then in the meantime they had enlarged, because there were more people living in the country. They enlarged the school and had it with a kindergarten as well as junior high school. So when we got done with junior high school, we went directly to the high school, which was downtown,
Okay.
10 miles away,
And what year did you say you were born?
1927.
27. So the Depression was 29 to 38, somewhere in there, 1929 to 1938. Do you remember as a child any of the years of the Depression? And can you tell us what you remember?
I know that it was quite difficult, but Mother and Dad sold some of the chickens for us to go to a movie maybe once every 6 months or something.
Right.
And also, when we got older, to go to the rodeo at Madison Square Garden in New York, which was 50 miles away, about 50 miles.
So you don't remember you remember the Depression years being hard times, but you don't remember going without food, or it wasn't that bad?
No, because they grew a garden, they grew corn, of course they grew the hay for the cattle and everything,
Okay.
right there on the farm, and Mother canned in the summer for winter food, and it was all delicious. She did a great job.
Right. Okay. How old were your mother and father when they passed away?
My mother was an old 15
15 what?
years, because she was the oldest of 10 children. And she took care of her younger brothers and sisters
Right.
a lot, and she skipped 2 grades in school, so she was very intelligent. And Dad had finished high school and he graduated, and he was the first one in his family to graduate high school, as I understand it.
Right. But you said your mother was 15 when she passed away?
No,
No.
no.
When she got married?
When she got married.
Got married.
I'm sorry, you meant,
Yes, I'm sorry.
sorry,
No, but that's good, interesting to know. So she was 15, and she skipped a couple grades. And,
yes.
So
she passed as the grade that she was in.
I see. And she, you said, I think you mentioned when we were talking before, she had 3 children by the time she was...
4 of us.
4 of them.
By the time she was 20.
20, right.
Yes. 2 boys and 2 girls.
Okay. And we'll talk more about your siblings in a little while. So your dad, he had graduated high school
Graduated high school.
when they got married.
And I believe that he went to a Connecticut State farming course or something there to learn more about the business in running it for the Dr. Wood.
Okay. Well, how old did they live to be before they passed away?
My parents?
Yes.
I believe my father was 64. He died of pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And my mother died, I believe, at 75 in 1984.
Okay.
She was 84.
84.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, any health issues in your family that you can remember? You mentioned the cancer your dad had.
And my mother had colon cancer.
Colon cancer.
And they had removed the cancer. They had to fix her heart before she could have the operation for cancer. And then she caught pneumonia after the second operation. She was doing well, and then pneumonia.
Okay. Your grandparents, did they die of natural causes, or were they?
I do not remember. I know that my grandfather died in 1942, like January, February 1942, because I know we were living in another house after we'd returned from Massachusetts. And I remember it was Pearl Harbor happened when we were living in that other house. And he died soon after, and then there were 12 children in both my parents' families.
Wow.
So we had 22 aunts and uncles.
And a lot of cousins.
And each,
Yeah.
each family.
Wow.
Cousins by the dozen.
Wow. I never heard it that way. That sounds good.
But my father's family, I don't know whether they, incorporated or something, they had called it the double dozen, meeting of all the wives and husbands. And they did that, especially after most of the kids, the cousins, graduated from high school. They
Right.
met a couple times a year, I think.
That's fun. That sounds
Yeah,
fun.
it was fun.
Now, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. Do you remember that personally?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about how that day was.
It interrupted a Gene Autry show,
How about that?
and I didn't understand right as something was happening, that, what was I, 10, 11 years old.
Right.
And I didn't understand, just that I couldn't listen, because I loved horses.
Right.
We had gotten a pony. Oh, that's right, before we went to Massachusetts. We had been there on vacation, and when we were vacationing, each of the parents, my mother we looked and walked around the neighborhood where our cousins or aunts and uncles were. And mother saw this pony that was on a stake and was tied to it, but had a circle with a rope, and had eaten the grass down and everything. And then there was a for sale sign there. And so she went over to the man and asked about it and everything. Well, he was a baker, and he was feeding the day-old bread to the pony, which you can imagine why the pony was sort of sickly looking.
Right.
And she negotiated giving him 25 chickens for the pony.
Really?
And he took it, and the dad would drive us up there. We'd stay for the week, and then he'd come back up the next weekend and bring us down. And so she told him all about this, that she had, and could they work it? And so they decided to take the rear seat out of the car and put straw in there and a little, flake of hay from the bale. And they went up the next Sunday and picked up the pony and put it in the back seat of the car. The pony walked right in. Mother had a treat for it over the other side with the door open.
Right.
And Dad led the pony in, and Flossie just walked right in and went for the treat, and they closed the doors and came on home.
Is that the pony we have of you standing on?
That I'm standing
I want to get that pony so everybody can see that pony. So, this is Eunice standing on her pony. And this is Flossie.
I was trying Flossie, and I was trying to imitate the stunts that the people did in the rodeo. And she was not a very patient pony, but I finally got her to stand still long enough.
Well, that's a great story. So Pearl Harbor, you said that the biggest thing, because you were 10 years old, the biggest thing you remember about it is it interrupted Gene Autry, which
Yes,
you were.
but then I found out what happened.
Right.
Then I was, and from that, my uncle had taken over where my father had been working on the farm. And all the 12 children decided that the one who had the least children would go and live with my grandmother so that she would have someone taking care of her. And it happened to be my Uncle Arthur and Aunt Peggy who left the farm, which meant we went back on the farm. and it made it convenient that way, and they only had 2 children.
Right.
So it worked out nicely that, and I hated to leave the farm in the first place.
Right.
But the pony had died in Massachusetts from sleeping sickness, so I didn't have the pony anymore. But when I had it, there was a stable close by, and we lived on a dirt road, and they would come by and then run and get the pony and run out and join them down. Mother would say, only to the end of the block, you have to turn around, because then it went on the asphalt.
Right.
And so we just, they got laughing, you know, the people that the two Power brothers were the names. And their names were Richard and James. And unbeknownst or thought about, that's what we named our 2 boys. One was Richard Timothy, and the other was James.
Okay.
And we called the one Timothy. And they were both adopted, so we named them after. One was called Jimmy and the other Timmy, so we just sort of, we changed it, made it Jimmer and Timmer.
Yeah.
Just so it'd be a little different.
Right. Well,
But anyway, my birthday was about 2 weeks after the pony died. And the Power brothers had a pony in their stable there. And they put the pony in a truck and brought it over, and I had it for the whole day.
how about that?
It practically makes me cry every time I think about it. Then they told my mother, anytime that she could bring me down to the stable, that I could ride around with them when they took people out for lessons or for just pleasure riding.
Right.
So I learned to ride a bigger horse than our little Flossie.
How about that?
But that was before we returned to Stanford.
To the farm. Pearl Harbor, and in the beginning of World War II, with all those family members, did any of them go off to sea, to the war, or any of them drafted?
My brother was 16 at the time of Pearl Harbor, and he went down to enlist in the Marines
At 16 years old.
at 16 years old. And the recruiters told him to go back and finish his high school. And I guess he was under 18 when he graduated, I think, and Mother had to sign for him. And she knew how much he felt drawn to be part of helping. And then he went in, and then my younger brother, when he turned age where he could enlist, he went into the Navy.
Oh.
And before they did that, my father had been in the Merchant Marine
Really?
during World War I.
Wow.
And so he and my older brother signed up for, I think it was weekends or night, when they used to patrol the harbor there in Stanford
Okay.
for submarines or any activity there.
How about that?
Yeah. They helped where they could.
Okay. Interesting.
And my mother and my sister worked at the Immaculate X-ray Company in Stanford. It was an X-ray company that built machines that X-rayed big trucks and things, I think, something like that.
Right.
I never got the details. And I used to come home from school every night and get what Mother had told me to prepare, so when they came home for dinner, everyone had dinner on time.
Well, so let's talk about you growing up and you getting married. You were 15, he was 18, and we have pictures of your first husband. Tell us your first husband's full name.
My first husband's full name, Walter Stevens Robinson III.
Okay. And
He
how,
was from Massachusetts.
Massachusetts,
Mhm.
okay. And how old was he when he died?
Pardon?
How old was he when he died?
He was 62. He
62.
hadn't had his birthday yet. He died January 5th, 1989.
And was he sick or was it
He had kidney cancer.
kidney cancer?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's right.
He had to have, when they found out what it was, he had to have it removed. And he wouldn't do it before Christmas because he didn't want to spoil Christmas. He
Oh.
thought it would spoil Christmas. So he had it removed in January.
Okay. And we have pictures of him.
The wedding
The
picture,
wedding pictures. Yes. And what year was this?
1954, May 15th. And my sister, my older sister, Helen, is the matron of honor, and my younger sister, Sarah, was the flower girl. And at the wedding, my younger sister was reluctant to walk down the aisle by herself, so my sister just said, well, let's walk down together. And she took her hand, they walked down together.
Before we get too far into the pictures, I do want to show a picture of Eunice when she was little. Now, which one are you, Eunice?
I am this one. And my brother, my sister, older sister's on the left, and then my younger brother's next to her, Chester. And then I'm the third one, and my older brother, Alfred, is on the right.
There you go. And let's see. Oh, that's your mom. Oh,
That was,
this is your mom and dad.
yes, that was at my graduation from Syracuse University
Oh,
back in 1949.
and we'll save this. Save that. Okay, I think we're good for right now. Second husband. Okay, now with your first husband, you had children.
We
And
adopted 2 children.
2 children, those were the 2 boys we talked about a while ago.
Yes.
And their names again, Jimmer,
Tim was the older one.
Tim.
He was born in 1960, and Jim was born in 1963.
Okay, they're about my age. So, what occupation was your first husband?
He was a field service engineer
Okay.
with Minneapolis Honeywell when we were married.
Did you work also?
I worked before I got married,
Right.
and I worked for the door company deal. Well, I did waitressing and during the summer holidays and things, and waitressing and babysitting.
Right.
Bought my own horse at 13 and rode in Madison Square Garden to try out one of their horses from the rodeo because they bought them locally
Right.
and then they sold them after the rodeo and got more money for them because they'd been in the rodeo.
Oh.
And so my father saw the ad where they were selling them after. And he said, how about going in, I had $65 I'd saved up. And he said, how about going in and see if we can find you the horse there? And so Mother, Dad, and I went in, and I got to ride in Madison Square Garden to try it out. And I said, it isn't peppy enough. But we found one in upstate New York at one of the branches, and her name was Tex,
Tex.
and she was just from Texas, and she was just right for me. She was a real good horse.
Well, okay, we need to mention that you did go to Syracuse after high school. And,
Yes.
And you
I did get a invitation to try out for the Connecticut women's softball team in 1945.
and that's interesting. Did you play softball in grade school growing up?
Yes. Our principal, Mr. Stuart Patterson, who was 27 at the age that he became a principal, it was his first principalship, and he called us I was in first grade that year, and so he called us his first graders. And he sort of, was checking up on us all the time, and he was the biggest help in inspiring me, at least, and I think the first graders, in never negative thoughts on whether you weren't doing enough. He would say, I know you can do better than that. And it was just, we all tried.
Right.
I mean, it was just, and he left to be in the war at the time after his first graders graduated from 9th grade, and he went into enlist, and they found out that he didn't have his hearing wasn't good enough to be in the service, so he joined the Red Cross and volunteered for that.
It sounds like a lot of young men in those days felt an obligation to serve. And
Yes.
I don't know that. Well,
Yeah.
That's
That was 9th grade, what was I? 14,
yeah,
15, somewhere in there.
right.
And he probably, besides my parents and my brothers and sister, were the most inspiring, of all in challenging me.
Right.
And I kept in touch with him, actually through, until he died in Vermont, where he retired, until I would say about midway in my college, or after I graduated, that's right, after I graduated. And he just he, along with the 8th grade teacher and my mother, because my mother had the use of the car because Dad had a truck, the farm truck, and he was working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took us to the hockey games and the baseball games. And he told the girls right at the beginning that we were all going to learn how to play some of the sports. We didn't have to play well, but we were going to learn the terms, because someday we may marry, and the men usually like sports, and if you knew what they were talking about, you would be a little more interested in what was going on.
Right.
And he felt too, the exercise and the playing of them.
It's important.
And so we all just worked hard at sports as well as we did with our studies.
Now, you were invited to play with, what was the name of the team again?
The Connecticut Nutmeg
Okay.
team, women's softball team.
Did you play on it?
No, I decided that, I asked myself, what after? 5 or 6 years maybe.
Right.
And I felt that going to college, when I found out I could, would be more beneficial.
I understand.
And I would have loved to play. And that's what the League of Their Own was I believe they interviewed the Nutmeg team as one of the teams, you know, to get the information for the picture.
How about that? Did you ever, did you see the movie A League of Their Own? And
Yes, I have a copy of it.
did you know any of the women? You know it was based on true story. Did you ever hear of any of the women, or do you remember some of those players?
One of the gals that became, I can't, she has a very popular name and she was very popular.
Madonna?
Pardon?
Madonna, or?
Something like Madonna, I think it was Madonna, could have been. But there were several of the popular girls that played in that movie.
Oh,
And I'll have to review it again, bring it back.
that was a great movie.
It was.
And I was glad those women, those young ladies weren't forgotten. And they could play ball.
Yes, they could,
Yeah.
they could. And my favorite position that I liked to play was shortstop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, I was short.
Uh-huh.
And a short person develops faster in coordination than a tall girl with long legs and long arms.
Did you have any trouble hitting the ball?
No.
No trouble.
Well, at age 80 in that book, I believe I went to the batting cage and I hit 57 of the 57 pitches. I dribbled, you know, I
That's
tipped
okay.
them and everything else.
Yeah.
I connected.
Right. Well, this is the book.
That's the one, yes.
This is the book. We'll
Yes.
find out later how talented Eunice is, and what an artist she is, what a great artist she is. But this is some of the books that she put together when she was 80.
I
And there
think
she
that-
is playing ball, holding the bat cage.
And I practiced on the beach with 2 T-ball setups
Is your son?
and a plastic ball and a plastic bat until the doctors said because of my arthritis I couldn't play anymore.
That's great. So, all right, so now let's talk about your second husband. What's his whole name, his full name?
Lyle Christian Peterson, Pedersen. He was Danish.
Peterson, okay.
Yes, like pediatrics.
Right, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I pronounced it Pedersen when I first heard it. But I met him on our way from Connecticut after our marriage, my first marriage, to Walter Robinson. And we were going to Long Beach where Walter was a field service engineer in the aeronautical division. And we got a call the day before saying we needed to stop in Minneapolis to pick up papers he needed to take to work. And we got there in the afternoon, and then that evening, my second husband and his wife, Vi, gave us a surprise wedding shower. And I thought how wonderful company that would, you know, have that happen.
So you didn't have to go pick up paperwork, there was a surprise party waiting for you?
I believe that's what was planned.
How about that?
Carried out very beautifully, and
Right.
it was just so neat. There were 5 or 6 couples there, as I recall. And I got a chance to meet some of the personnel in the company, but also their wives.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I first met them. And that's who I think my first husband had set me up for. Later on, I didn't know it before, but I sort of figured it out afterwards.
How about that?
Few things connected,
I see.
and he was concerned about after he had the cancer and everything, and when they found out it had gone throughout his body, that it was terminal, and so he kept we all kept hoping that something would happen, but it didn't
Right.
that way.
Well, and your second husband passed away when?
He passed away 1 week after his 88th birthday.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was in 2006.
Okay. And these years are, I know there's a lot, I know I'm taxing your brain to come up with all these years, but if someone ever does a family tree, these years will help them when they're looking up these names. So I appreciate you working your brain overtime tonight to come up with these years, because it'll help somebody
Yeah.
out.
You know when some things happen to you that they stick in the mind for quite a while.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
But at 90 years old, and the way you're giving out all this information is amazing. So it's obvious you're very,
Well,
very
thank
smart.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So how did you end up in North Carolina?
First thing I decided that I wanted to make the decision when I would stop driving and when I would get into a retirement situation.
Right.
Independent, but people, nicely run facility. And my sister lived here. I promised my first husband that before he died, that I would be buried next to him in Springfield Cemetery in Massachusetts. And so I wanted to make it easier for my sister and for my son to take care of arrangements. And San Diego was too far away, you know, this way. And I had a nephew in Hollywood who writes screenplay, and his wife, I get this mixed up, but they both write for the industry and do a very good job. Carter is working with Spielberg, was working with Spielberg on a movie, and I think he has contact with him. And he's had quite a few good scripts. And I just felt that it would be better if my sister taking care of arrangements, because it'd be closer to where I will eventually be. And so I asked her if she would look around and see where there might be a place that, and she offered to do it and went to 2 or 3 places, and then she came up with Capitol Oaks, and she sent me the brochures and everything, and then she named this one as number 1. And when I flew out to just check it, and I said, well, why don't we start with number 1, and maybe we don't have to go anyplace else. And I said, number 1 is number 1. And I'm very pleased with the way they handle things, and the pleasant staff they have, everything about it.
Right.
And so that's why, and I decided it was time to give up my car, which was hard to do, but no. I'd rather make the decision myself than someone else.
All right.
And I would encourage anyone to start looking if they're getting that way. And I wanted to have it completed by the time I was 90. That is, that I was in the place. And then I started the remake on the book there. I figured if I was ever going to get it in position to keep my promise to the university, that I needed to do it before I left. there.
And we're gonna talk more about that book in just a short while. How do you like North Carolina so far?
How do I like where I've landed?
How do you like North Carolina itself?
Oh, very much so.
Good.
Very much so. Yes, I have been, I've probably driven through it in, well, it doesn't matter the year. I can't tell you that one now. But it was somewhere 49, 50, 51.
Wow.
In that time frame. And I came with my cousin, who wanted to always come to California, and one of my roommates. And she was a nurse and had been in the service, and she wanted to come too. So the three of us decided to come, and that was the time when I had joined the door company, and I went in the file department because my roommate from Vermont, her husband was at Yale Law School, and he was going to graduate the next year, and then they were going to get married. And they were engaged that year we graduated in 49. And so she was going to be leaving that next year when we graduated. And not that year, she was going to, after we graduated is when we went to California, driving.
Right.
And my cousin had just bought herself a new car, and so she and I did the driving, and we shared it, but we had an agreement that if any one of us decided we were going to come back to Connecticut, we intended to go out and all get jobs.
Oh.
And stay there for a while.
Oh.
And we all got jobs, but my cousin was from a family of 9, and she got to start missing her family, it got to be Christmas. And so we didn't tell anyone, but we decided, she said, I've got to go back. And I said, okay, then we go with you. And we left about a week ahead of time. We got home Christmas Eve. We made it by Christmas Eve.
How about that?
And then we stayed in, and I went back to work at the door company, and I heard that the vice president of U.S. sales, I think it was, his secretary lived on Long Island, and she had to go in from Stanford to New York City to go home to Long Island, and vice versa in the morning. And so she had to get up like 5 in the morning to make the trip. And it was wearing on her, and she told me ahead of time that she was going to resign. And she said, why don't you talk to Smitty and find out if you can go. And Mr. Smith loved baseball. And when he heard that I loved baseball, he got a lineup of 9 fellows, and I got a lineup of 9 girls, and we happened to have a baseball diamond just outside the building,
Right.
where the other company before that had a team, So we played, they beat us, but that's all right, we had fun.
That's funny. Well, that's good.
Yeah, it made it, just a fun. When they heard I played baseball, they were telling me what team they like and talking about it every once in a while.
Right.
And so we had fun.
Well, not only are you a great athlete, but you also, you're a very good photographer. And I want to make sure we get this story in about your book. That means so much to you. So this is a book that Eunice put together, and you have to tell the story, because you made a promise to the university 70 years ago.
70 years ago, it was a term paper, and I went to the associate professor and asked if I could do a photographic interpretation of Tennyson's In Memoriam. Now, Tennyson was at Oxford with a very dear friend of his who was 26 years old, and they became very good pals, and his friend had a heart attack one day and died overnight. And Tennyson was so distraught that he just lost his faith. And he began to write the poem to help himself just come through it, as well as just getting out his sorrow about it. And he wrote the poem over 20, 30 years. I don't remember exactly. But he kept adding to it, and finally decided that yes, there was a God, and but his faith had been stricken, and he suffered from it himself, but he got through it, and it was such a touching poem that I could relate to it, and I just asked the professor if I could. And he said, well, we really haven't done it before, but go for it. So I did, and I made it photographs interpreting lines in the poem. And if it had been now, I would do it a little bit differently, probably a little more thoroughly. But at that time, there was only black and white, for one thing, which may have added to it too. And I had a family where I babysat, and the gentleman worked in New York City at Time magazine, was associate art director. And he allowed me and showed me how to develop the prints and enlarge them. And much of the information when I was doing this, and I probably did it in his darkroom. And so when the professor gave me back my term paper, he did give me an A, and he gave me a very good critique on it, which helped me a great deal going forward. But then he showed it to the English department at Syracuse University, and they, Dr. Cady at that time was head of the library, I believe, and he asked if I would make a copy for the library, for the university, and I promised him I would, and at the end of the term, I turned in a copy of the book to him, or to put it on his desk. He was talking to other students at the time, and I had to get to my class, and I should have handed it to him. But anyway, it never showed up in the library, and I inquired, but they said nothing was there. But then I had to get jobs and working and everything. And when I decided to retire from everything else and make my own decision on that retirement and move to where my sister was living, I had been working and being helped by a graphic artist who did a good job on all my things, and had encouraged me because the original was falling apart. He encouraged me to bring it up to date, and so I asked him if he still would help me with it, and he said yes, he would, and he proceeded to do this copy, which turned out quite beautifully. And I thought that I should keep my 70-year promise. So I sent it in on March 30th, I think, of this year, just before I was getting ready to move out to North Carolina. And I didn't hear from him, so I didn't know whether it had arrived where I promised it would go. I spoke to my sister after I moved out here in May and told her about it, that it was 70 years and I was turning 90, and I sure wish they'd write me and let me know at least that they had received it. And she said, well, let me take it and see what I could do. Well, she emailed them and she said, I sort of hedged a little bit to let them know that you were turning 90. And lo and behold, I had the biggest birthday surprise I think I've ever had when she got word back from the head of the library at Syracuse that they were going to put it in the archives and that it would be put into. Do companies and universities have separate things, or what do they do? I guess the PDF.
Yeah, there's a PDF file, and people can, it can be, I think he told you, people can look it up and it'll be available not only to Syracuse students, but to anyone in the country or anyone in the world that has
Yes.
access to the Syracuse library.
That's what David Seaman said in the email that he mailed back to her. And so I do have a copy of that email, and I was just thrilled to death to know that it finally, after 70 years, was going to be there.
Right. And that was probably your first, you were interested in photography at that time, but this was your first chance, I guess, to put some things together.
Yes.
And turn it in and make something really great with it.
I did have a couple of pictures in the Stanford Advocate that when they had a photo contest that won, little prizes.
There you go. Well,
that encouraged me too.
Well, and then as the years went by, you were very, very artistic, putting together all these posters. And these are family members of hers that you can zoom in on and see these. These are just, well, there's the love for baseball right there. You gotta love that. And you said you were a big San Diego Padre fan?
Is that upside down at all?
No, this is good. This.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I got the right one.
Yeah. And these are things that you made. This is San Diego Padre bat. They gave you a bat.
They gave me a bat because we made a T-shirt for them to be able to enhance their children's foundation and supply bats and balls for the children's foundation. And it couldn't be used. They found it couldn't be used. And so they gave me a tour of the stadium, the new stadium, Padres Stadium, and also a bat with my name on it.
You've got number 17. That's Philip Rivers' number.
Yeah.
He went to NC State here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
He went to college here in Raleigh. And
there are other just commemorations. That was a trip that my sister who lives here and I made to Colorado in 2007, and to visit my older sister there, our older sister.
all of this, Eunice did.
And I had got my, that was for my cataract surgery. I was apprehensive about having it done, but I found that if I thought about taking pictures of it or something that I wouldn't worry about what was going to happen. Just enjoy taking the pictures and having someone take it.
Tell us about this celebration of life.
That's my sister on her funeral,
Oh.
celebration of life. That was in 2014. And I did have that graphic artist friend that helped me with all of these, and he sort of got a big kick out of it. And I understand where they printed the cards, that they had these up on their blackboard. Not blackboard, their, what do you call the board?
Bulletin board.
With pin them on. And this is one about Syracuse University, some of the buildings in it, of where we met. And could be said it was sort of love at first sight. Almost.
The tennis court, that's where you
At
had.
the tennis court.
There you go, yeah.
Mhm. And this one
This is
was, I
San Diego.
believe, a recording of when my first husband proposed to me. I think that was when it was that he said, "I can't promise you the moon, but I'll try." And then he worked on the Apollo program.
And this is him.
Picture is of when I first met him, the first year, 1948. And is that the, Jim's wedding?
Yes.
Yeah. This is last August when Jim was married to Paula Nelson, and she has 2 children. So
Beautiful,
I flew to Minnesota to be in the wedding party.
beautiful family. So much evidence of.
And then
how-
finally, my horse.
Oh, yes, the love of horses.
The dream horse that I had, and that was my work at home. I raised horses and trained them after the professional trainer had trained them. And then the boys rode them and learned to ride, and then we sold them. And that was my home work.
We literally have a pile of evidence of how creative Eunice was, and very, very good at it, obviously. Eunice, you have some notes here. Do you want to look through these and see if there's anything you've left out that you might want to add?
Only about my shirt.
Oh yes, please tell about your shirt.
That wasn't recorded then.
No, it wasn't. No. So tell us about your shirt.
I was telling Jeff about the fact that I have a doctor's shirt, which I have on right now. I call it my doctor's shirt because where's the place in the world where the people are the saddest? And I feel it's at the doctor's office because they are anticipating bad news or going to be getting a shot, and they aren't very happy to be there. They'd rather not be there. And so I wear a yellow shirt, and because it's bright, and some people just smile, at somebody wearing a bright shirt. And some of them make comments such as, "You look like a ball of sunshine coming in the door." But it gets them to smile, and in turn I smile because they've smiled. And I have a 95% average of getting people to smile.
That's A.
And I get there early because that way it allows the doctor to shift around. If somebody gets stuck in traffic, and we did have traffic in San Diego, he would take me so that the person who wasn't there, and they wouldn't feel so bad when they found out that that someone else. And I enjoyed being able to get in and get out before I was supposed to be in. But I had quite a few, and I've been keeping track of that for about 10 years now.
That's a good story. Well, looking back over 90 years, if you had to give some advice to young adults growing up, what kind of advice would that be for them to be successful in life?
One of the things my family had a motto of was expect the best, or hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and take what comes. But also to try and look on the bright side of anything happening and try and see if you can make somebody else smile instead of being unhappy when things are in the negative. And as Jeff said, make lemonade out of lemon.
Right.
And I find a positive attitude on things. People may think you're crazy, but that's okay. At least they've got a thought. And it makes just, they're smiling sometimes to think that she's crazy. But crazy in love with life and people.
You've made me smile this whole interview, so Eunice, I so much appreciate the opportunity to meet you and to talk to you.
It's so nice to meet you too, Jeff.
And hopefully this Sunday you'll meet my wife, and we just really look forward to sharing this with the rest of the world.
That would be fun.
Yes, it